Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching.
News right now, the information is now reporting that TikTok is building a new version of this app just for United States-based users ahead of an expected sale to U.S. investors. This is a real report issued minutes ago by Sylvia Barnum O'Regan saying,
How you guys doing? Give me 1 second, guys. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching. As you can see in disaster prayer out in this beautiful Sunday, two people in Texas who are going through it. We're gonna try to see what's going on. What's going on over there. Sorry for the noise. I'm eating while I'm doing this video. Just got out from church. And I thought I might share that with you guys. Let's check out some information. C G G C G T.
Drone footage shows partially submerged houses and an intense current on a river in Georgetown, Texas, following heavier than forecast rain. This has triggered flash floods in central parts of the U.S. state. A number of evacuation orders were issued for mobile home parks and apartments in Georgetown, and rescuers continue a frantic search for more residents who are still missing. At least 50 people, including 15 children, have been confirmed dead following floods across Texas, according to authorities. Drone footage shows partially
I played this video before I start talking. It's because that is the consequence of elected elected incompetent people, and we have those kind of disaster. Those kind of disaster. That's what happened when we had COVID, because we were so unprepared for it. We had COVID. Now that is the second wave of shit that happened so far. First we had the plane crash. Then now we had the hurricane, the flood. I'm in Florida. I'm worried because we are next when it comes to hurricane. They cut budget and FEMA. They cut budget on everything that need assistance for prepare to protect all U.S. citizens. And cutting budget for like giving tax cuts to the wealthy gonna equal to people dying. Equal to people dying. This is what we don't understand when we care more about political party than care about our well-being in life. Check out.
And what a horror story in Texas. The flash floods in Texas, the Guadalupe River. 51 missing, 51 dead, more missing. Children at a camp. And you know, when the president guts all of the early warning systems and the weathering forecast abilities of the government, these are the results that we're going to start to see on a daily basis, because he's put this country in so much danger by his horrible, horrible decisions and this ridiculously immoral bill that he just signed into law. As Republicans cheered, people will die as a result, and they've started already. Shame on him. Shame on every GOP sycophant who's listening. And what a horror.
And after the bill was signed, right? After the bill was signed, in certain states, I believe in Virginia, in Michigan, they're already shutting hospital down. You understand? Because those people, 85% of their income is coming from the city, some citizen that their payment is through Medicaid and Medicare. Now, if you got out of Medicaid and Medicare, they already know those people are not gonna have able to pay, and they cannot operate a hospital where without when there's no Medicaid. That's why emergency fund collect. Majority of emergency fund, even if you don't pay, they normally will write this out to Medicaid and Medicare. All they need is your name and your last name, and they will go get that money from the government from you when you go to an emergency. That's how you're able to walk out without going to jail. I watched this video, right? I wish I could play it for you. There's a YouTuber I follow called BourjuadailyTV, where there's several, almost 100 people who's in jail inside a hospital, a private hospital, because while the hospital saved the individual life in that city in Ghana, those individuals cannot leave because they cannot pay, and they don't know if people will be able to pay. So those family either have to find a way to sell animals, so sell bill to pay little by little before they have to reach a certain level to get those people out. So what BourjuadailyTV said as a YouTuber during that day, I think he paid almost for like 10 or 20 people dead. There was somebody that was in there who was in there for 2 years, could never leave. Imagine the hospital saved your life, but he's stuck inside the jail. He could not live for 2 years, and the government is okay with that. That's when in Ghana. This is where we're headed when we spend everything privatized. Let's watch another video.
Trying to catch your breath? Because I see you hopping between softwares all day instead of using Connect Team, the all-in-one platform.
Amid major cuts to National Weather Service and NOAA and other federal agencies that monitor and track and warn folks about the weather, HHS Secretary Kristi Noem is defending the government's response to the disaster in Texas. Kristi Noem says that President Trump is, quote, currently upgrading technology at the National Weather Service. However, the president's mega bill, which he just signed into law on Friday, makes cuts and even closes some weather research labs that help make forecasts.
The lies cut for up this system. That's the lie they come. That's what the same thing they do when the Russian airplane and FAA was crashing out. They say up this system. They always find a nice excuse to lie. I digress.
Improvements. A local meteorologist tells us the area is so prone to flooding here in central Texas. It's known as Flash Flood Alley. And local officials say because the area is so sparsely populated that no one was there to warn folks of what was coming downstream.
Going to be a long time before we're ever going to be able to clean it up, much less rebuild it. But There's nothing on the other side of Criders. It's just hill country. And we didn't know. We know we get rains. We know the river rises. But nobody saw this coming.
Joining us now to discuss is former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Administrator, thank you so much for being with us. The National Weather Service, we've learned, sent out early morning warnings about life-threatening flooding, but officials say they would have had a difficult time figuring out how serious this threat would be. Given what we know now about the forecast and the warnings that were put out, do you think there was a breakdown between forecasting and local preparedness?
Good morning, Boris. You know, I just want to first start by saying how much my heart breaks right now for all of those families in Texas and watching what's going on. We continue to see so many of these types of severe weather events just intensify at a rate that isn't expected. And I think, you know, my opinion is that we need to continue to invest in the research that's needed, because the types and the strength of these storms keeps breaking records and keeps surprising people because of the impacts from the changing climate. And so, you know, whether there was a breakdown or not, I wasn't there, so I can't say. But I know that we need to continue the research so we can better understand how these storms are intensifying and what the damage potentially could be from them.
Well, do you have any awareness or understanding of what the Secretary is describing in terms of technology upgrades that are needed? Obviously, National Weather Service, a separate agency, but nevertheless, it seems like she's insinuating that this is a long-held problem. I wonder if you had ever been aware of it.
No, I personally have not. I mean, the National Weather Service has amazing forecast centers, right? We use a lot the National Hurricane Center. There's the National Water Center. There's the Storm Prediction Center. And it's a combination of technology and scientists that come together to understand these storms. And so whether or not they have technology that needs to be updated, I don't know. I mean, technology changes so rapidly that there's certainly a possibility that technology needed to be updated, but we also need to have the people that can use it and understand and look at these storms and understand how they're going to react and where they're going to provide the most impact.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to that point, I'd recently spoken with officials with the National Weather Service who had been warning that a lot of areas are understaffed, in part because of DOGE cuts. We also have the president signing the Big Beautiful Bill Act into law, which guts a number of different programs. The president has been direct in his view that federal emergency response should be handled by the states. He has a very different perspective of what the last 4 decades or so of federal emergency response has been. I wonder what your concerns might be about having states, individual states, look after folks when things like this happen, because these incidents are of enormous scale. I wonder if you think that would be an impediment to getting folks the help that they need.
Boris, it's important to remember that states and local jurisdictions have always had the responsibility to take care of the people in their communities. I was a local emergency manager in Colorado as well as in New York, and every one of these types of events starts and ends with that local emergency manager, and then the state comes in to assist. And that's what we're seeing happen in Texas right now. And Texas is a very capable state. You know, I had to talk to Governor Abbott many times because of the severe weather that we experienced during my time as administrator. And he has a great team and they do a good job of getting out there. But we see these events continue to become so significant and exceed expectations that even a state like Texas needs some assistance, right? And so how is that assistance going to continue to be able to be offered and deployed to communities that need it timely, right? We need to get resources in there as quickly as possible to help with search and rescue, but also this massive debris removal effort that's going to have to happen in the next days, weeks, or even months after a storm like this.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar, where you can drill deeper into our 9 to 13%.
former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. We have to leave the conversation there. We're so grateful to get your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is on the ground, and she immediately said President Donald Trump will honor the federal disaster declaration signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. We've covered so many disasters over the years with different presidents. What did you take away from the secretary saying that the president will honor this request?
It's not clear exactly what that means. It hasn't cleared through the president just yet. He hasn't signed. I just checked my email. The disaster declaration hasn't come through. Often these are pro forma. They come through with ease. Often presidents approve them even before the disaster hits. But in this case, it was a surprise. It was a flash flood that came out of nowhere. And so they weren't able to, stage resources in advance. I think there are a lot of questions right now that we don't have answers to about how things are going to work this year as hurricane season is beginning, as really the summer disaster season gets underway, with the changes that the president has talked about and how he wants FEMA to work. I think there are still a lot of questions about what that means and how it will work and sort of functionally on the ground, what it'll look like.
Lauren, you cover the House of Representatives, obviously. This clearly impacting Texas members as well, including one whose daughters were at this camp.
Yeah, Congressman August Pfluger spent the week here in Washington trying to pass this one big, beautiful bill, only to come home and realize his daughters were missing for a certain amount of time. He has since posted that the family's been reunited and actually thanked a number of the federal officials, including FEMA, for trying to help in this effort. And, something that I will be watching is how Congress responds, because so far we have seen a Republican-led Congress, both the House and Senate, not send disaster aid out to California after those wildfires earlier this year. Leaders actually saying that they don't trust Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom to be able to actually responsibly use that money. I don't think they will be saying the same thing if and when a disaster relief request comes in. This is obviously a Republican-led state, but they're going to be having to manage a number of things, including Trump's own budget this year, asking Congress to defund FEMA and also make sure to cut a number of other organizations. The fact that you have a congressman who has been directly affected, I think Congress might be looking at this in a different way than the Trump administration initially was looking at all of these responses.
Laura, what have we heard so far from the White House, and what are you watching for in terms of the administration's response to this?
Well, earlier when you talked about whether or not the administration would honor that word that the secretary used, honor a request, I think it's also because we have a history of President Trump in the past, sometimes politicizing after natural disasters like this, depending on which state was hit by a natural disaster, him maybe not sending money to blue states or states that are led by Democratic governors. The fact that North Carolina also wanted more funding after their natural disaster prior to the president taking office, and them not getting it once Trump came into office. So I think that you've seen him being willing to withhold more disaster relief from states when he thinks that maybe his voters aren't in that state or they aren't impacted. And there's reporting from the first administration that it was only when he found out that certain voters of his, people who supported him, were impacted, that then he decided to release more funding. So again, yes, to your point, I think that the response to Texas may be very different, given that he is going to be facing some pressure from a number of Republicans in Congress to respond to this quickly.
There's nothing like a disaster that really shines the light on why government is needed, why these bureaucracies and infrastructure is needed. But many questions obviously will be raised about the warning systems in the National Weather Service. But here's what one official with the National Weather Service Employees Union told CNN. He said that while he believes the offices had adequate staffing and resources, the Austin San Antonio office is missing a warning meteorologist, a role that serves a crucial and direct link between forecasters and emergency managers. It says vacancies were the result of early retirement incentives offered by the Trump administration. So as we learn more about what do you think this says, and what questions do you have about the overall readiness of this government in the wake of DOGE and other cutbacks?
There is a balance between acts of God and what man and government can do to prevent people from being hurt by storms that come out of nowhere and massive rushes of water. I mean, some of this you can do a lot of after action reports and you can do a lot of studying and you can find things that could be done better. But the fact is the water was still coming.
And certainly there's a lot of discussion about research and funding and how much these storms are actually intensifying.
Guess which student has a better chance of getting into an Ivy League school? First, take a look at Zach. He's valedictorian, National Merit Scholar.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is heartbroken. We begin this morning in Texas, where the situation looks increasingly dire after a torrential rainfall Friday that rapidly swelled rivers and in moments became a fast flood that swept away dozens of people, including more than 20 girls at summer camp. This morning, more than 50 people are confirmed dead. Local officials say they are still focused on search and rescue as President Trump sends his Homeland Security Secretary and additional resources to the area. Here with me now is Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro, whose district is under a disaster declaration. Thank you so much for being here. We are just so sorry for what is happening in and around your district. What is the situation like in the flood zone right now?
Well, it's absolutely devastating. And San Antonio is about an hour affected. But Barrett County is part of that disaster declaration. There are about 15 counties that are. And San Antonio also experienced flash floods in June that took the lives of about 13 people. So right now, there are 51 people, it looks like, who have been declared deceased, and still 27 young girls who are missing from Camp Mystic. And most of all, I think people are coming together. They're rallying to support the community and the families who have lost loved ones. It's been very heartening, I know, for everyone to see all the donations and the support that's come in, but just a complete tragedy.
I mean, beyond, you mentioned the more than 20 girls still unaccounted for at Camp Mystic. It's a summer camp along the Guadalupe River and in nearby Kerr County. It was flooded after the river rose more than 20 feet in just 2 hours overnight. What can you tell us about the search for those girls specifically, Congressman?
I mean, the effort is intense. The state has sent incredible resources. The local governments from different places, Austin, San Antonio, many others have served first responders, just everything that we possibly can to help. I think obviously the priority is on making sure that those girls are found and are saved, and anybody else who may be missing at this point. And then I think after that, we have to figure out in the future how we make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And there is more rain in the forecast to come. How will that affect the rescue efforts?
Obviously, it does make it tougher if those rains start up again, especially if they're flash floods or just torrential rains. As I mentioned, we had a similar issue in San Antonio with flash flooding a few weeks ago, and there were 13 people in a matter of hours whose lives were taken. And so it does make it tougher if that water starts to rise again. But I know that there are hundreds and hundreds of folks out there who are searching, and hopefully their efforts will bear fruit.
What questions do you have for federal officials who are involved in this search and rescue and involved in predicting and preventing this kind of tragedy?
What if you can create your own website by saying, this is what I want? With Wix, you can. First up, let's talk about AI color themes. You can get any combos you want, bold and bright, minimalist and sleek, or something you didn't even think of. Just describe the vibe you want, or even use the colors of your logo, and let AI do its thing. Beautiful. Next up is the AI section creator. This is great for those website essentials like a contact section or a place to subscribe. Now, I'm running a sale, so I punch in some details, and just like that, I have a promo section. Functional and beautiful. I love it. Now, for the AI text creator, I got some products that need description. So I type in some keywords And there it is. I've got copy that lands. Now,
Well, look, we have to make sure that the resources are there to save people's lives, to prevent these kinds of tragedies, to make sure that the National Weather Service has all of the personnel and the resources that it needs to make the predictions and then do the analysis that it needs to do to help local communities be prepared for things like this. And then also, I think the state government should take a look at it's got surplus, no a fund actually, that's got tens of billions of dollars at this point. I think the governor and state government should look at what they can do in terms of longer term planning to be helpful in helping to prevent this kind of flooding to the extent that that is possible. Again, this all happened very fast. You're obviously dealing with a natural body of water. And so, you know, but there are things that you can do to mitigate the chances that this happens again in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the key questions. As you said, you want to be prepared and you want government resources to be in place so that there is preparation. But when something happens this quickly, the question is whether preparation is even possible. And on that note, how much do you think the changing climate is part of what we are seeing go on here? Not just what we're seeing in the pictures that we're showing on the screen, but even the flood that you talked about in San Antonio in June.
No, I think climate change is obviously a part of it. These floods are happening more often in more parts of the country and really all over the world. And so we have to face that reality and be better prepared for it and combat it.
And just talking about the federal government and even the local government, 2 Texas National Weather Service offices involved in forecasting and warning about flooding on the Guadalupe River are missing some key staff members. A director of the NWS union told CNN that the Austin San Antonio office is missing a warning coordination meteorologist due to the Trump administration's buyouts. Do you have any indication whether those or other cuts helped play a role in the fact that the people in the flood zone were not prepared and certainly not evacuated?
If you're looking for a house, you should be looking for a mortgage.
You could mortgage in the dark.
Or know the steps.
No, I can't say that conclusively, but I do think that it should be and I don't think it's helpful to have missing key personnel from the National Weather Service not in place to help prevent these tragedies. And, you know, when I say that we ought to do everything possible to help prevent a tragedy like again, that's part of what I mean. You know, that's why there's an incredible value to the National Weather Service is because, you know, on most days, obviously, you're not going to have a tragedy like this. But when you have flash flooding, you know, there's a risk that you won't have the personnel to make that, do that analysis, do the predictions in the best way, and it could lead to tragedy. So I don't want to sit here and say conclusively that that was the case, but I do think that it should be investigated, and having, you know, not having enough personnel is never helpful.
Congressman Castro, thank you so much for being here. And again, we are so sorry for the tragedy that is still ongoing in and around your district.
Good to be with you.
And we are following all the latest out of the flooding in Texas. We will bring you every update we get as we get them.
My brother here, he had to swim out of his cabin. The flood started getting bigger, and it was going up to, we have bunk beds in our cabins, and it was going up to the top bunk, and we had one choice, and we had to swim out of our cabins.
What time was it?
It was like, we woke up at 2. Yeah, we had to wake up at like 4 a.m. But on the way here, we saw all of like the other camps destroyed, like obliterated.
The Boyette boys are lucky to be alive. Welcome back to breaking news coverage of the deadly flash flooding here in Texas. You just heard from those boys how they described escaping the flooding from a camp where they were staying. Yesterday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a federal disaster declaration, something that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said the president would honor. The National Weather Service is defending itself regarding the alerts that it issued and the timing of them. Christina Dahl, the vice president of Climate Central, addressed the role of staffing at NWS and other federal agencies and whether cuts are potentially impacting forecasts.
I think it's too early to say. We do know that the National Weather Service issued multiple warnings about flood risk, and so clearly they were getting messages out. They do have a vacancy right now in a critical position called the Warning Coordination Meteorologist. And so it could be that that vacancy had connections to local authorities who could have helped to raise early warnings for residents. But generally, the Weather Forecast Office for the National Weather Service has someone on staff 24 hours watching the radar to see what is happening in terms of precipitation, rainfall, other threats. And there are National Weather Service offices throughout the country that, because of staffing cuts, are no longer staffing their offices 24 hours a day. And so we need these critical people to be keeping us safe 24 hours a day in every one of these offices across the country. And the second piece of this is that staffing cuts at NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more broadly, are threatening the future ability to forecast events better. Forecasting a storm like this one, where exactly is the heaviest rain going to fall? How is it going to translate from rain into flooding? These are extremely challenging problems scientifically. And it's the research of NOAA that enables us to improve our forecasts year over year so that we can more accurately pinpoint the warnings that need to go out to the public.
Now, the very reports designed to warn us of these extreme weather risks have seemingly disappeared. Legally mandated national climate assessments, long used by state and local officials to prepare for climate impacts, have been quietly removed from federal websites. The White House says the info will now be housed within NASA. Joining me now, the man who helped build this very system that's now being taken apart, John Holdren. He's the co-director of the Science, Technology, and Public...
Wait, what? Wait, what? Are you kidding me? So you mean like with the system that's supposed to let us know is probably take away from the system and it's supposed to go to NASA but it's not fully activated yet? Save us, God, save us.
Public Policy Program at Harvard University's Belfer Center and a former science advisor for President Obama. Thank you so much for being with us on this holiday weekend. Let's start here. For viewers who might just be hearing about this, what exactly are these national climate assessments, and what does it mean that they've effectively vanished from federal websites?
Well, the national climate assessments of climate change impacts on the United States were mandated in a 1990 Act of Congress, the U.S. Global Research Act of 1990. And they are supposed to be produced roughly every 4 years. Some have been slow, but on the whole, there have been 5 such reports produced. The 6th was recently canceled in midstream by President Trump. And the 5 previous ones, which were all posted on the U.S. Global Change Research Program's website, have disappeared for the moment. They may show up on the NASA website. We can hope so. But the whole fiasco is simply one aspect of a campaign by the Trump administration to dismantle large parts of the U.S. research establishment, and in particular, to dismantle every effort to better understand and predict what climate change is doing in the United States.
Well, John, help me understand this a little bit more. You've warned that suppressing this kind of information could actually increase the danger Americans face from climate impacts. How does that work?
Absolutely. The national assessments have provided information about how climate is affecting every region in the United States and every sector of our economy. It's the only set of reports that are sufficiently detailed in those respects to be useful to decision makers, to city planners, to mayors, to governors, to tribal leaders, so that they can understand what steps they need to take in their domains to reduce the impacts of climate change on people, on property, on ecosystems, and on their local economies.
And now, John, you've called this just one front in a much broader assault on scientific analysis, as you were saying earlier, across climate, medicine, pollution, even public education. What's your sense of what's really driving this? And what might the long-term consequences be if this continues?
Well, it's of course very hard to see into the minds of the people, starting with President Trump, who are orchestrating this campaign against science and reason. But one has to assume that it's some mixture of a desire for total control, a desire to eradicate sources of independent analysis and opinion that might provide information counter to the policies that President Trump is trying to advance.
Well, it's fascinating, and I just appreciate you taking the time, especially out of a holiday weekend, to break all of this down and to really illustrate the importance of talking about this issue. John Holdren, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Imagine hearing a ringing in your ears all the time, and the noise can be so loud it can be debilitating. It's called tinnitus or tinnitus, and more than 50 million Americans are living with it right now.
I spent 3 years fighting that persistent sound in my ears until a friend showed me what specialists.
President Trump's big, beautiful bill is now law. And as he hits the road to sell Americans on that new law, the president is also facing another deadline this week. More than 100 countries have only 3 more days to meet the deadline he set to make tariff deals. Here with me now to talk about all of that is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Let's start with the new law and who it helps. The Tax Policy Center says the majority of the tax benefits will go to Americans making $217,000 or more a year. The Yale Budget Lab says the richest Americans will see their income rise by nearly 2%. The lowest earning Americans will see their income drop by 3% when factoring in cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. You argue that the benefits will really be aimed at the middle class. How does that square?
Dana, first, let's have a look at the Yale Budget Lab, because I was looking at their findings, and this week I actually went on their website. They're all ex-Biden officials, so I think we can discount everything they say. I'd encourage all your viewers to look at the composition of both the board and the staff, and it's just not right that what we have here is a middle class and working class bill that we are going to see wages accelerate, and we are going to see, just as we saw with President Trump's first tax bill, we are making permanent these tax cuts. And what happened in 2017, 2018 was the highest wage earners went from paying 37% of all taxes to 45%. So that's going to be permanent now. So permanently, the highest 10% will pay a higher percent of the taxes.
I should say that, taking the Yale Budget Lab aside, there are Republican senators who are worried about affordability and who this all is going to affect.
Look, I think affordability, safety, and growth are the 3 things this bill is going to generate.
One of the tax cuts that are in here are for, and the president talks about them a lot, are on tips and overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Those are temporary. Why not make those permanent? They're only 2025 to 2028.
This is a big part of President Trump's agenda. So, we have what I call parallel prosperity here, that Wall Street has done great. Now it's time for working Americans to do great. And this is President Trump's agenda, so we've got it in for the duration of his term. And we will see if the next administration wants to do that.
And just talking about the affordability, how is making cuts on Medicaid programs?
Well,
how does that and how it affects the the people who are at the lowest ranking when it comes to income. How does that help with the affordability crisis in America?
Well, first of all, that affordability and saving Medicaid, let's separate those. And only in DC is a 20% hike over 10 years, a cut. So Medicaid funding will go up 20% over the next 10 years. The people who Medicaid were designed for, the pregnant women, the disabled, and families with children under 14 will be refocused. The able-bodied Americans are not vulnerable Americans. So a work requirement or a community service requirement, that's very popular with the public, and many state programs have that now.
It might be popular, but it's not what the president promised. The president promised that there would not be changes to Medicaid benefits, and putting a work requirement is, by definition, a change to benefits.
No, there are no change in benefits. There's a change in requirements to get the benefits. And what we are doing, we are bringing back manufacturing jobs. We are bringing back working class jobs. By securing the border, we have already seen working class wages move up. So we are creating jobs. People can get off Medicaid and get a job that has good health care benefits, Dana.
In theory, that works, but I'm sure you've seen and heard a lot of the concern, including and especially from Republicans who are the most vocal in Congress, about the fact that those work requirements are going to be very cumbersome to actually prove, and it will inevitably force the people who need that Medicaid coverage off the rolls.
Well, first of all, the Republicans are not the most vocal on this. It is a group of Democrats who unfortunately seem to think that poor people are stupid. I don't think poor people are stupid. I think they have agency, and I think to have them register twice a year for these benefits, that it is not a burden. But these people who want to infantilize the poor and those who need these Medicaid benefits are alarmist.
Atera is the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management, remote access, help desk and ticketing, smart automations, patching, software deployment, scripting. And the amazing thing is that it does all this while still being easy to use. It's magical. Just this clean, intuitive UI where everything is where it's supposed to be and does what it's meant to do. Sorry, I get emotional. Not to mention, with predictive alerts, you solve real IT issues before they become IT problems.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of how awesome I am at fixing your computer.
And with advanced reporting and analytics, management can finally understand why I'm the real MVP. Also, per technician instead of per device pricing, that saves us 50% of our IT costs and makes me the new.
Yeah, but my impression of the Republican Party is that historically you've wanted to cut through the red tape and not create more red tape. But I do want to move on because
no. But we've also wanted to put in work requirements, which somehow that was very popular under Bill Clinton, was popular under President Obama, and this Democratic Party blew out the deficit in 2020, and they never want to bring it back. But work requirements even poll well with the median Democratic voter, maybe not the fringe.
let's talk about tariffs. President Trump gave countries a 90-day pause on the sweeping tariffs he put in place back in April. That pause ends in 3 days. What happens on Wednesday?
We'll see. I'm not going to give away the playbook because we're going to be very busy over the next 72 hours. President Trump's going to be sending letters to some of our trading partners saying that if you don't move things along, then on August 1st, you will boomerang back to your April 2nd tariff level. So I think we're going to see a lot of deals very quickly. And, Dana, we're going to send out probably 100 letters to small countries where we don't have very much trade. And most of those are already at the baseline 10%.
But you said August 1st. Do you mean what's going to happen in August?
So countries will get a letter saying that if we have not reached an agreement, then you will go back to the April 2nd level.
Starting when? On August 1st?
On August 1st.
Okay, so there's basically a new deadline.
It's not a new deadline. We are saying this is when it's happening. If you want to speed things up, have at it. If you want to go back to the old rate, that's your choice.
When you say that there's going to be a lot happening over the next few days and you don't want to give me the playbook, is there a playbook?
Sure. The playbook is to apply maximum pressure. We saw that the EU was very slow in coming to the table. 3 weeks ago on a Friday morning, President Trump threatened 50% tariffs. And within a few hours, 5 of the European national leaders had called him. And Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, was on the phone. And the EU is making very good progress. They were off to a slow start.
The president said some countries could end up with tariffs as high as 70%. Which countries is he talking about?
I think you'd go back and look at the April 2nd levels. But again, none of those are major trading partners. There are 18 important trading relationships that account for 95% of our deficit. And those are the ones we're concentrating on.
Are you close to any deals before Wednesday? I know you're talking now about August 1st, but where are you on?
We are close to several deals. As always, there's a lot of foot dragging on the other side, and so I would expect to see several big announcements over the next couple of days.
Can you name names?
I'm not going to name names because I don't want to let them off the hook.
Okay.
Car insurance used to stress me out.
You don't need to stress out about car insurance. You just go to Insurify.
They can help you save money and headaches.
No spam, no calls, no fees.
You can do this entirely online.
Before Insurify, it would take you hours of phone calls.
And look, I'm already done. That is my current bill cut in half.
If you need help shopping,
Insurify has licensed agents
in all 50 states.
This is the way it's supposed to be.
Go to Insurify.com and save up to 50% on your car insurance.
When you talk about these letters and you talk about kind of the 90 deals in 90 days, or at least the president did back in April, so far that we've seen 3, and they're not concrete deals the way that we're used to seeing trade deals. They're frameworks. Mm-hmm. The president has a reputation, self-described deal maker. So why haven't we seen the kind of deals that he promised in the last 90 days?
Again, he didn't promise this, and when we send out the 100 letters to these countries, that will set their tariff rate. So we're going to have 100 done in the next few days. And
but that's not a deal, that's a threat.
No, that's the level. That's the deal. If you want to trade with the United States, this is.
But that's not a negotiation. That's just a
many of these countries never even contacted us. So that's the thing about being the deficit country, Dana, is when you are the deficit country, you have the leverage. These are surplus countries that they have exported more to us than we export to them. So we have the leverage in this situation.
You know, when I talk to small business owners, both doing interviews with them and just in and around in my life interacting with them, I have not met one who has not said it's the uncertainty with the tariffs that is making it so hard for them to do business because they're kind of frozen in place. What do you say to those business owners?
Well, I'd say 2 things is the other thing they would probably have been telling you is it was the uncertainty around taxes. So with the one big beautiful bill, they now have great certainty on taxes.
No, they've said tariffs.
No, but let me finish. When I'm out talking to businesses, they want trade and taxes.
I want to get an update from Kerrville now with
Lupe River. There are hundreds of volunteers from Bernie, from Ingram, from Center Point, from all over Central Texas who have come out here donating their time. They have shovels with them, they have walking sticks, and they're going into this scene of devastation, essentially following the water here. If we pan over here to my left, you can see the areas that they're searching for and why it is so grueling and slow. They have gloves on. You're talking about teams of like 5 people lifting up these heavy limbs to search every nook and cranny that they can to make sure that they're not missing anyone. I heard from several of the volunteers that in this area alone, just yesterday, several victims were unfortunately found. They're not just looking for these victims, they're looking for things like this, Boris. You see that over here, a personal item, a jacket. Whenever they find something like that, a piece of clothing, they set it to the side, they note it, and they told me that they're waiting for essentially cadaver dogs to take the next steps. I can hear the sound of chainsaws in the air as they're incredible.
Lose the right weight the right way, now 2 times faster. With Medi Weight Loss, our customized GLP-1 medications can help you.
All right, guys, that's it for today, guys.